Welcome back. Glad you're up. The Federal Reserve leaving key interest rates at a record low yesterday. And the man at the center of that decision, Time Magazine's Person of the Year, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, who wants to be renewed. So while the magazine praises him for keeping the economy afloat, what about the record job losses, unemployment right now? Did he really deserve this honor? For a fair and balanced debate, David Wessel is here. He's a columnist with the Wall Street Journal and author of In Fed We Trust. Peter Schiff, Republican senatorial candidate in Connecticut and author of Crash Proof 2.0. Peter, let's start with you. I assume you not only don't support Ben Bernanke as Person of the Year, you think he almost should be Villain of the Year. Why?
Well, absolutely. He's done more damage to the U.S. economy than any other person in the country. So if we want to recognize him for that fact, that we can do that. But I think we should save Person of the Year for people who do good, not for people who do bad. Remember, the people who are praising Bernanke are the same people that were praising Greenspan as he was inflating the housing bubble. Bernanke is doing even more damage to the economy. His stimulus is even more toxic than Greenspan was. And the effects of it, it was because of Alan Greenspan that we had the economic crisis of 2008 that Bernanke and Time Magazine, think that they've cured. But the crisis that he's setting up, the collapse in the value of our money and the inflationary depression that we're about to enter into is going to be far worse than anything that Greenspan created.
And on the other side, David, you feel as though, hey, the market's back and more, correct?
Well, Mr. Schiff is running for office, and I'm a newspaper columnist, so we're not exactly in the same position. He can give the case for the prosecution, but I'm not here to give the defense. I think the problem Mr. Bernanke has is that if you hung a banner on the Federal Reserve, it would say, not mission accomplished, but it would say it could have been worse. And that's not a very compelling argument. I think the facts show that Bernanke made a dozen mistakes, some of them when he was at Alan Greenspan's side earlier in the decade, and some in the run-up to this crisis. But when the crisis hit its peak, some his fault, much not, in September 2008, he determined to do whatever it would take to prevent another Great Depression. And I think probably unemployment would be worse, the stock market would be lower, and GDP would be shrinking instead of growing had he not taken the steps he took.
We have to think forward. Unfortunately, the crisis hasn't hit its peak. It's going to peak at a much lower level because of the short-term stimulus that we're using. And, I'm not criticizing Bernanke because I'm running for Senate. I was criticizing Alan Greenspan when I wasn't running for anything. And I criticized Bernanke when he was working with Alan Greenspan to undermine our economy, destroy our currency, and inflate the housing bubble. We need a Fed chairman that's willing to be unpopular, that's willing to, to give discipline, monetary discipline to the economy, take the punch bowl away. We don't want a Fed chairman being Man of the Year.
Peter, David,
well, I don't think there's any doubt that Mr. Bernanke is unpopular. That's his problem. I mean,
if he was then why is he Man of the Year?
And the polls are against him. He's going to have more votes against him on the floor of the Senate than Paul Volcker did in 1983.
David and Peter, that'll have to be the last word. Great debate. We're just scratching the surface, but he is Man of the Year, and we'll see if he gets a renewal. Peter Schiff, David Wessel, good job. Meanwhile, up straight ahead, let's talk reality. Giving New Jersey